We are a medical resort. That's what we choose to call ourselves.
That will be the last time I call you that in this discussion.
No nursing home. People in our company are going to see that, like, you let them use that word. No.
Hi, I'm Matt Egol, the host of the CX and Culture Connection, the podcast for leaders looking to drive an impact by focusing on customer experience and culture together. I'm really excited to be joined today by Jim White, who is a Rhesus Cup. He's the combination of culture and experience. What a great fit for today's show. Jim, thanks for joining.
It's my pleasure, Matt. I'm happy to be here.
And I say a Rhesus Cup because not only Halloween is here, but his title is at Ignite Medical Resorts is Chief Culture Officer. And he's also been a Chief Experience Officer in the past life. So we'll have a chance to dive into both topics today.
Well, and you know what they say, two great things that go great together, right?
Fantastic. So, Jim, you've had a really interesting journey yourself, working across a number of different industries. You've worked in the gaming, space, and you've worked in hospitality, and now you're working in healthcare. What do those all have in common that have led you to be on that path?
Well, the tie-in for me between both industries is that the platform that I built upon has always been about guest experience, right? And so in hospitality, it's all about the customers that come into your business, right? In healthcare, it starts with the employees who have to have great experiences to give to the patients that we care for. And so, and yes, it would be the same in hospitality, but that's the common thread. If you lead the experience along and people understand what the goal is and you pull it all together, then you can have a seamless experience with great service attached to it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we both share this passion for how culture and customer experience come together. You were just talking a minute ago about the employee connection, and that the way your employees show up is what drives a great customer experience in many cases. And culture is all about behavior, and who has the behaviors? Your employees. So what got you interested in this, like in the culture space, and what are some of the things that you focused on in your role as focused on culture?
Well, it's funny because the culture stuff came naturally. All of gaming was about experience for me, right? And then I got hired into healthcare to create a hospitality-based customer service program for the company that I worked for at the time, which was basically the same small group of people that I worked with here at Ignite. And so at Ignite, it morphed into this bigger role of trying to create experiences for the employees that manifest as culture, right? And so having great programs for them, giving them things to dig into to make their experience at work better, making them happier employees and giving them things to look back at, which in turn we retain them because they were happy, right? The experience with the guests or patients was always better. And, in the space we work out of, we've done relatively well.
I mean, what you're highlighting is for Ignite, the brand promise is about a highly emotionally engaging quality experience.
Yeah, we talk about extinguishing the stereotype, so to speak, and because the industry I work in is basically considered, bad word for us, nursing home, and it'll be better. We always talk about what we say is extinguishing the stereotype, right? And the stereotype is we don't want to be like a nursing home. So we work really hard to do things better in that regard.
What does culture mean to you? What does it mean to be focused on culture?
I think that it's got to be a common thread that's shared not only with the management team across the industry or the company, I should say, but it's also got to permeate at the building level with the building management team so that everybody's on the same page, working towards the same vision. And it's hard to do. And I would say always, Ignite, we make tons of mistakes because we're a growing company that was very small and now is like considerably larger, right? And so, but having that message be something that is shared across the company and it's pushed out by our CEO and our chairman, and it's the executive team I work with carries it through, but has to get down to the building level so that the building management teams are able to guide their teams to continually promote what Ignite's vision is. And so that whole culture or the fun aspect at work or the things that come from it is what we try to focus on as a company.
One of the definitions of culture that I like is culture is how things are done around here, right? It's like the behaviors of the people. There's lots of definitions of culture. I spent a fair amount of my time when I was at Booz and Company and PwC as a partner, as part of the Katzenbach Center for Culture Leadership, and got to work with some really interesting people focused on culture. But I became the guy who worked with culture as it intersected like digital transformation, customer experience, helping companies to be more agile, behave more like startups, to be more innovative, to change the way they worked. And over time, I learned that also is important for how, not just internally how you operate to work in new ways, but how you show up with your customers. And I think that's arguably the most important. And so culture is all about behavior. So, how do you, first, do you agree that behavior is the most important thing, or are there other aspects of culture that you focus on beside behavior?
It's what you said is kind of funny because one of the things we do when we onboard a new employee at Ignite is the very first day of orientation, which is all fun, by the way. We do no work, right? But the first thing they go through is customer service / culture training. And when I go through the definition of culture in that presentation, I talk about it's the personality of the company. And so behavior, yes, there's a tie in between those two things, but culture is the personality we put forth. And there's a choice on how you do that. And so getting the employees to understand that and put that into their daily routines and how they interact, not just with the guests or patients or family members, but with each other. So addition to behavior, I would say personality is a big piece of what culture is, at least in our company.
I think that's a really good way of looking at it, Jim, that at a company and a strategy is like not where you want to play, but who you want to be.
Mm-hmm.
The choices you're making as a company strategically are who you want to be. So you're personifying the company. What's the personality? What's the kind of company you want to be? The stories you're telling about yourself. Same thing's true in a company. And I think this is just like habit building.
Mm-hmm.
You can act your way into new mindsets if you have a vision of who you want to be or what type of group you want to be in, then your behaviors will comport with the vision you have of yourself. So telling those stories about who you want to be are actually really key to the culture and the strategy.
Yeah. And, as I said, we're in a growth mode and we're ever changing, but I always say, we know who we are. We know what we're trying to accomplish, and we work very hard every day trying to be that. And if you were ever to go out onto the company's LinkedIn or Facebook pages, we do things like all of our buildings live on one Facebook page. So we consolidate everything you do. You'd see employee celebrations, you'd see guest celebrations with warm welcomes and fond farewells. And there's a thing that I do where I get to go to the buildings when I'm there and pick a very deserving employee and give them a $100 gift card. And those videos are what people see the most of because we don't allow guests, especially on our Facebook page, to leave reviews. They can comment on posts, but we remove the whole review piece of Facebook and we save reviews for Google or Indeed or Glassdoor if it's employees. But, our Facebook page is really robust with content about the things that we do every day.
Mm-hmm. So what type of, you mentioned the onboarding experience. What are some of the other employee experiences you focus on that reinforce the culture and the behaviors you want?
Is the fact that we have all kinds of programs we put in place through our benefit program, and they're all things that the employees have the ability to take advantage of, and they have to earn. So we don't just give. We have programs that they can earn, Ignite swag and extra PTO time and gift cards and cash bonuses and all kinds of things. And that's introduced to the new employee at orientation, but we continue to make those celebratory things happen throughout their tenure with the company, so that the whole behavior or culture, or as I said before, personality we talk about, is something that stays front of mind for all the employees.
You're gamifying it and you're making it fun and you're making them proud of their progress on their employee journey. That's really cool.
Well, we try, right? We're we're fairly successful, but like I said, it's everyday thing. Like, got to work at this every day. It's not something you can push out there and just expect to stick. Like, every day you have to be doing something to promote that.
So I like to say that emotion is kind of the driver of a lot of good experiences, both the customer and employee, and it's what makes them memorable and meaningful. Like our brain is a memory making machine that we remember things based on emotion. And in fact, it's like our operating system, like unconsciously, most decisions get made based on emotion, that dopamine hit rather than rational thought, like 95% of things. So what are the emotions you care about for the customer experience or the employee experience that you're focused on reinforcing through the culture?
Well, before I get into that, let me just tell you, it's funny, the way that you describe what you said, it is exactly my basic belief. One of the things I carried from hospitality into healthcare was the whole notion of service being a feeling, right? So service is feeling based. People make decisions based on how they feel, right? And so that was part of my training in hospitality. It's a big part of the training that the employees go through on day one with customer service at Ignite. So at the end of the day, the feelings that we want them to concentrate on, really for themselves first, are happiness and pride about where they work, so that as they feel good about the environment that they work in, that does come through in how they interact with each of the patients or family members, or even each other. Because, if a family member or a patient has a really bad experience and they feel badly about the way they were treated or welcomed or cared for, that makes every decision that they make moving forward. Like, the whole experience is defined really in the first 10 minutes. But if the feeling is bad, then you get bad Google reviews, bad recommendations, bad surveys. And conversely, if it's good, you get positive Google reviews and positive word of mouth and high net promoter scores, which we use in our business as well, just like hospitality, so that people would recommend us to a friend. And at the end of the day, that keeps our buildings full and the business moving forward.
What you're highlighting is, I think we're both saying the same thing here, which is that behavior is habitual. You want it to be habitual. For it to be habitual, good behavior, good habits, you want a intrinsic reward system where people feel certain emotions, which, they want that next emotional feeling. And they want to be proud of themselves. They want to be proud of their work. They want to get that good feeling. And you don't want to have to rely on formal things like reviews and punishments or constantly being under the microscope to drive behavior. You want people to do that because of how it makes them feel.
Right. And regardless of the reward systems that we put in place to promote those things, the basic understanding of that feeling is it has to start with the way they feel, not only about themselves, but the company or business that they're working for. And again, that's why we start our orientation the way we do. You come into a continental breakfast with the management team, and then you go right into customer service training. We take them out of the building for lunch. Like, these are all things that most people in the space that we work in, they don't do. You come back, you play a game show, we do a scavenger hunt, we send you home for the day with a little bag of goodies with your uniform and stuff in there. And we do all of it while people are in persona of some type of superhero. And so, again, it's fun from the second they come through the door. One of the things that our CEO has always said, and it's in a couple of the videos we have out there and stuff that we've done in the company, is from the moment you come through the door of an Ignite resort, we want you to be able to feel the difference, right? It's a different environment. And that does start with the employees and that behavior that you mentioned.
Mm-hmm. What you're highlighting is a shift from kind of a purely HR lens, human resources lens of like, hey, there are moments that matter from hire to retire. And we're going to make the employee feel better about those moments that matter, all of which is important. But what you're adding now is how the employee makes the customer feel, which also makes the employee feel proud of themselves too, and feel good about themselves. So there's a virtuous, you're talking about two circles overlapping. I think there's the employee experience and the customer experience are overlapping. And what we're highlighting is, don't just focus on the employee moments that matter with an HR lens and the customer moments that matter with a marketing product service lens. They're actually intersecting, because the employee behavior is what creates those emotional peaks for both the customer and the employee.
Absolutely true.
And so when you were in gaming, what were some of the things you learned from that you've applied now in the health space and in the dare I say nursing home space?
Well, yeah, that bad word. Um, we are a medical resort, so
There we go.
that's what we choose to call ourselves.
That will be the
But
last time I call you that in this discussion.
no nursing home. People in our company are going to see that, like, you let them use that word. No. Anyway, it's funny. I never actually made the shift away from hospitality to healthcare. When my CEO, who's my CEO now, who was the person who hired me away from the gaming space in the first company that I worked for, told me from the very beginning, I don't want you to become a healthcare person. Healthcare people think differently, which is true. And that's not a cut. And in any way, right? They think differently about the environment that they work in and the experiences they want the employees to have. And so every bit of who I am and what I believe, I've carried from one industry to the next, because fundamentally, it is who I am. Like, that whole service is a feeling thing. I live my life that way. You try to make sure that you engage people in a way that they feel good about that engagement for all those obvious reasons. But I will tell you that people ask that question a lot. And I would tell you that there isn't really all that much difference between these two industries, or maybe any other industries that are out there, because fundamentally, people are people, right? And so if you can continually touch on those, touch points or emotions, as you mentioned before, and keep your message clear, um, it works. And it worked in gaming, and it works in healthcare as well.
You and I have that in common, Jim. Like, um, in my own personal journey, I started in the retail and consumer space, actually media, retail, and consumer. And the common denominator was things being disrupted by the internet and digital. So I worked on, how digital was impacting as a consultant those industries. But I learned actually in retail things that I was later able to apply in travel and hospitality, and later financial services and healthcare and tech, collaborating with other partners and getting pulled in. And it actually became a virtuous circle. I didn't just take what I learned in retail into healthcare. I actually took what I learned in healthcare back into retail. And anyone can learn from anyone. And there's a lot of commonalities, like you're pointing out, across these industries. You focus on people, emotions, good experience, good behavior. It's all good.
If anything, Matt, I've taken more from the healthcare space back into the gaming space, because, I still have friends in gaming. I still do a project every now and then. Clients that I had when I was doing more consulting work in gaming, I would never turn my back on. So if they call me and they're like, hey, we need you to come back and do some customer service training with the team, or they do it annually, or they want to continue to do it, I've gone back and shared the culture things that we've done here in healthcare about how our retention is so much better than a lot of our competitors. And I've shared those things, which the hospitality companies, the gaming companies were like, wow. And, it's hard sometimes because it's a financial commitment to do those things. But a lot of the companies that I've dealt with have been very interested, not only in the conversion between the two industries for me, but me sharing some of the things I've learned here, which were new to me, that I've taken back to them. And so what you said is true. Going back and forth, or the circle of all the places you work, they are all tied together. You can learn from every place.
That's what makes it fun and interesting, is to work with interesting people across different companies and always learn. I want to call out for the audience, if you're interested in this nexus of new ways of thinking in the healthcare space and how to drive more of a new and innovative approach in healthcare. Jim's a great guest on this. I want to call out some of the other recent guests that we've had, and then encourage you to like and subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss these episodes. One would be one of my earlier guests, Vin from Oak Street Health as a CXO. Recently had on Shruti, who's at InCare, and she actually has a background from Amex and Citi, applying what she learned into healthcare. And also Todd Unger from the American Medical Association, who actually had a gaming background like Jim before he took on his role in the AMA. So there's a number of guests I really enjoyed talking to who are driving really cool stuff in the healthcare space, kind of mixing it up across industries, which is I think a lot of fun to get their perspectives.
So can I ask a question? Because I'm not going to lie, I have not seen that podcast. But the gentleman that came from the gaming space, like myself, were many of the things that he shared with you similar to what I've talked about from that industry?
A lot of what Todd focused on in his experience from the gaming industry was really focusing on what makes the customer tick, like what's the value to them, what really gets the nod from them. Here's a phrase he uses, like what really connects with them. And that and you really focus on building insights into who you're trying to serve, and that you learn that in the gaming industry, and how to do that with data, how to do that with insights, and you can apply that with healthcare. He also talked about culture, and a lot of his focus in culture as a chief experience officer has been how to broaden engagement beyond his immediate core team. So rather than just his team won like CX Team of the Year, they won an award. But he talked about the 500 or 600 people who showed up at an annual meeting, and they all wore, name tags of what what their role and their contribution to CX is. It's like it takes a village. Everybody
Hear
works
that all the
together. Yeah, it's not just the core team. It's the core team is there to enable and engage everyone else and build a customer-centric culture.
Yeah, I'm going to have to check that one out. I think I would find that very interesting as well.
Yeah, I think you guys would hit it off. So, what do you think are the main things as a chief culture officer you do that impact customer experience?
Well, I always say I have to live my brand, right? And so I mentioned earlier that when we do orientation, people show up as superheroes, right? And that starts from the building. And we give all the people when they start in the company a superhero t-shirt so that, if they don't want to dress in a costume, they have something that I've given them to make the experience what it is. But, I live my brand. Like I'm not going to do this here on the camera, but I have superhero tattoos on my body so that I'm always ready for orientation, right? And so, I have the company logo in one of the superhero tattoos that I have because at the end of the day, like I live my brand. And so I think that making sure that you are true to who you're trying to be, I guess that's a message there. Being true to that is what's most important because even though I spend a fair amount of time in the corporate office, not that we don't really call it corporate either, but the corporate office, which is in Park Ridge, Illinois, we have 24 buildings in 6 different states, and I spend time in each of those buildings as well. And so when I make a trip to the building, if it's orientation, I try to make sure that I have my superhero wear. Like I have a Superman cape and a Superman t-shirt that matches it. And so when I go into those buildings, like those employees are them seeing me as the first interaction that they have with the company sometimes as well if I'm there for orientation. And so making sure that, we're living it and I'm pushing the building teams to live it is really important. I think that's the basic building block of at least the culture that we're trying to promote here. Like if I'm not going to do it, who else is going to do it?
Mm-hmm. Do you have a certain set of behaviors you're looking for to spot either where people need coaching to engage in those behaviors more often, or where they engage in them to reward them? You talked earlier about the gamification, but how do you think about, like, is there a set of behaviors you're reinforcing, or is it more, or do you think about it differently?
No, I think that it not just us, but in many industries today, people hire based on personality. Like from the second I started in healthcare, I made sure that, you have to hire for skills as well. Like a nurse still needs a nursing license, a CNA still needs a certification, right? So you have to be aware of those things. However, if you take a couple of extra minutes in times where there isn't a staffing crisis, because, COVID changed all that, right? But if there isn't a staffing crisis and you can take a couple extra minutes to think about the person you're hiring and see if they have the skills to possess a friendly, welcoming greeting and a smile on their face when they don't have a mask on. And, they have that basic, because most healthcare employees have that basic level of compassion or they wouldn't be doing what they're doing, right? But if you can go one step further and look for those behaviors from the very beginning, I think that is very telling. And so when we don't see those behaviors, we do our best to try to coach people up. We give them many opportunities to try to get on board. And, ultimately, you want your employees to be happy. And when employees aren't happy, my basic advice to the buildings is tell them to go find their happy. If they can't be happy with us and they can't really embrace what we're trying to do, perhaps this isn't the right environment for them and they should look for what makes them happy. Because for them to make us happy, they have to conform a little bit to what we're trying to do.
Mm-hmm. I mean, what you're highlighting is the cultural fit starts with the interview process.
Absolutely. I
It's,
think many people would agree with that too.
yeah, 100% agree. There are certain behaviors that it's really hard to change them if you don't have them. And so getting somebody who has the right fit is important. And then you can evolve a culture by reinforcing behaviors, but it's really hard to take out a clean sheet of paper and just completely change. It's really impossible
Oh
to,
no, it takes
you
time.
have to, takes a lot of time. And the best way to change things is through the right people, having the right people. And then you can reinforce and amplify and make sure bad habits don't creep in once you have them in there. And you can start working on changing some of the habits, but you have to have a foundation to build on, and recruiting is probably the best place to set that foundation.
Yeah, and sadly, because of the staffing crisis I mentioned before, which has happened, there's not enough healthcare workers in the industry to fill the positions we have, right? And so, in times of great need, the whole hire for personality mantra goes right out the window. That hire because it's a body that can work that spot, and that's always the beginning of certain issues that happen because they carelessly, forgive me, make a choice that they probably wouldn't have normally made if they weren't so desperately understaffed, right? And
So
so
it's expedient.
yes, but it's a vicious cycle. And you know what? We're guilty of it at times as well. We try to be choosy all the time, but we don't run external agency. So when you are, running tons of overtime to cover the shifts because you have a lot of openings, the only relief is to get people hired. And unfortunately, when you get people hired, you hire whoever you need to hire to get out of that mess. And so vicious cycle. And a lot of companies, including us, are guilty for that.
Mm-hmm. So recruiting and one of the most important things a leader can do is make the right hires. Once they're in the door, you can reinforce the right behaviors. You talked about ways of doing that through some of the gamification and making it fun. And I imagine people giving positive reinforcement when they see the right behaviors.
Yeah, we have a company store and we give out what's called Spark Bucks because Ignite everything is fire themed, right? So the
I
Spark
love the spark metaphor because of JourneySpark. It's in our brand.
nice. So we give them those Spark Bucks to go out and buy things, and so that's always instant recognition that can be given at any given time. And so we do try to make sure that those things are happening so that employees will feel engaged. And one of the other things that we do regularly is we really monitor and measure the 30-day turnover, right? So employees that have left within their first 30 days, because that always signifies to me that there's a problem in the building with onboarding. So orientation isn't being done right. They're not being welcomed properly. There may be a contingency of people in the building that are bullying them, right? And so they're not getting training properly, like getting thrown on the floor without it. And so we monitor that metric as well so that we can catch some of those things really early and course correct them as we move on. And so that's a metric that is really monitored here as well.
So one of the tools that people use in experience a lot are like journey maps and then customer listening. How do those figure into your medical resort business?
It's funny because, let me take a step back. In my consulting days, I've done several journey mapping trainings. Matter of fact, I didn't make it to this year's gaming show in Las Vegas, and even though I am in healthcare, I was going to teach a mini class on customer journey mapping, but because of the hurricane, I didn't get out of Florida because that's where I live, and I had to forego that. I was doing it with a partner, so thankfully she handled it. But a journey map it is a very instrumental piece of any operation. If you can take that map and really identify the touch points at every point of your business where you have the ability to make positive change to change the experience. The problem is that a lot of people don't ever take the time to really, they think they know what the guests or family members are experiencing when they come through your building. The fact is we don't. And so getting people involved to give us that feedback, or really taking the time to talk to some of the line level people who are in the trenches and know what's going on, and really thinking about the touch points and the good and bad points of them and where we can redirect is a huge part of any experience, whether it doesn't matter the industry, it's any experience. And so journey maps are something that are ideally something that everybody should take advantage of to really understand, because it's a living, breathing document. So you can always make changes to it on the fly as you learn new things. And, the biggest lesson is that it gets everybody on the same page if you do it with the management team of the building.
Um, I'll, I'll give a little plug for a moment for something, if it's okay, that um, I think it's great you do a training class at the hospitality event. I'm a training and learning partner with the CXPA, the Customer Experience Professional Association. So we're doing at JourneySpark, we're partnered with CXPA to provide their online training for what we're calling data-driven approaches to customer personas and journeys.
Mhm.
So you can see on screen the link to the CXPA site where you can learn more about the course and to perhaps go to one of the open houses to learn more about it.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm going to check.
the Yeah, definitely, Jim. I'd love to get your feedback.
You can always learn more by taking in, different perspectives. So absolutely.
When One of the things I like to do with journeys, to bring it back to something we were talking about earlier, is to infuse a lot of emotion into it. Where I think of the peaks and the journeys, or the dips in the journey, the trials in the journey, is that's where emotions are strongest. That's what makes them, the whole peak end rule. That's what's most memorable, are the peaks and the end. The brain literally filters everything out. Anything that's not a peak is a mem moment. You just don't remember it, other than in the moment, right? But if you ask someone later about something that wasn't a peak, it just wasn't memorable. And then what makes it memorable is the emotion. So I like to focus on what are the emotions that are happening that create those peaks. And then actually, what are the behaviors you want your employees to do that create those peaks? That's actually what creates the CX and culture connection. And what makes it data driven is a few things. One is you can actually construct your personas in a way that are more data driven, so that you can, they become actionable segments over time to track improvements, and you can actually drive experimentation. And the other thing is it's data driven because you can measure the emotions and the behaviors along the journey. It's not all art. You can have science too.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's funny because the one emotion that's really hard to gauge, and it's usually never positive. In our business, you have family members that come in that don't really accept the progression of their loved one's condition or illness. And right away, we're blamed or we're cited for not doing something because they don't understand the progression of what's about to happen or what's happening. And so, looking at something like that is a really difficult behavior or emotion to try to tackle, because they don't want to hear education. They don't want to hear, how it's supposed to be. They don't, it's difficult. I'll leave it at that, and you would expect it to be because you're dealing with seniors in a population where we're going to be seeing them more often in their life because of them heading towards, the end of their life and not being able to always be on top of the health conditions that they possess. And so, dad has a fall, he goes to the hospital, he comes to us for rehab. While he's with us, we discover that maybe he's experiencing a little dementia. And the family member's like, no, dad's been fine. He can go home. There's no issue. Okay, but there is an issue, right? And so those little things, those nuances make this space so much more difficult to try to navigate even some of the data you're talking about, because it's really hard to gauge the mindset of the family members that are coming in based on, their love and feelings for their loved one that we're caring for. So yeah, that's interesting.
So you're clearly in a people business. We're all in people businesses, but especially what you're describing. Um, how is AI impacting the way, and how do you humanize AI in an environment like medical resorts?
It's funny. I figured that this would come up because it is really a trend that is ever growing. We honestly don't use AI all that much. We have started to dabble in it. And so, but we dabble in it in some of the more external things, like, you write a job description and AI redoes it. You do an email that you're trying to make it sound the right way, and we let AI redo it. Right. And, so we're using it for communication more than anything else, which I think that's where it shines anyway. But honestly, we're on the precipice of using it at all. It's really something that has just kind of started. We recently added a social media director to increase our online presence and some of the sites we're on as well. And she has been indoctrinating that into a lot of the little things that we do. But it's a slow process because at the end of the day, technology does scare some people. But, the world is moving that way. So you kind of got to get on board or you're going to be left behind at some point.
A couple of other podcast episodes the audience could check out if you want to go deeper on AI. Or one is my episode with Sid Banerjee, who the time we recorded this is one of my first podcasts. He was the chief experience officer at Qualtrics, and really one of the forefront of innovation in AI. He's since left to launch another company. He's a serial innovator. Yeah. So and he founded Clarabridge, which Qualtrics acquired.
Right. And so funny thing is that I used Clarabridge in the gaming industry. That was the first survey platform / net promoter tool that I used. And when we started Ignite, or actually the first healthcare company we were at, I still use them until they stopped taking smaller clients. But I'm very familiar with that company as well.
Yeah, and then another one is my podcast with Amaresh Tripathi, who he was a partner of mine at PwC, led the analytics practice. We teamed together a lot. And then he founded a startup called Oxo AI, which is all about AI co-pilots. So those are a couple episodes you might have some fun with. The I think this, in the healthcare space, there's obviously a lot of low hanging fruit around summarization and saving people time and making it through summarization. You can also, like you said, improve communications, but you got to be careful that you don't automate something a human being needs to be closely involved in. So that's why a co-pilot is often a good thing versus replacing a human being.
Yeah, I would agree. And, I've been approached many times, both in healthcare and hospitality, about recording and automating customer service training. And my answer is always absolutely not. Like you need to have a human element to this. And somebody that's watching a video is never going to get the same experience out of something than somebody like me standing in front of them and adding anecdotes of experience that have happened along the way and making sure that you're personalizing it and humanizing it to a point where they understand what's expected. And so I would agree with that. The human component cannot be lost.
But there is a lot of communication, like you're saying, where in one hotel company I worked with, we had a massive growth in messaging going to people. You think about why wait till the end of the experience to send a survey when you can message them during the stay at multiple moments in the journey, and it's both part of the experience and a source of insights. It's both and. It's not, rather than wait till afterwards to get feedback, you actually engage them in conversation. And in many cases, these messages are what a human being might have done in the past. So it's augmenting, and you get more communications that you can start optimizing. I imagine you got to be cautious about starting to automate some of the messaging in a medical resort, but there are probably some parallels about, how to optimize next best comms, next best content for people.
Well, and it's funny you mentioned that because over the last year and a half ish, we have added little kiosks in the building rather than taking somebody and having them sign in manually in a book, right? They now sign in on the kiosk and they have to sign out when they leave. And, how was your experience today? Is there anything that we need to know that was wrong? And so soliciting that feedback is actually part of, it should be part of any company's journey when they can incorporate it in to learn those insights to make, to do course correction immediately rather than waiting for them to go home and take a survey where they're going to dog you in some way that you weren't aware of when they were there. Or God forbid, go out and leave a Google review because, Google's not very friendly with, challenging reviews that really aren't accurate, but okay. But yeah, so getting that feedback along the way is a great asset for companies to do.
So if you had to give any advice to anyone who's listening about how they can better engage on culture within their company at the intersection of CX, what's your advice given your experience about where they can get started and where they can focus to have an impact?
Well, I think that you need to take a step backwards first. And I think that the most important thing is to first define what you're good at or what you want to be the best at, right? And so we have 4 things in this company that we tell everybody. We want to be best at these 4 things. From there, part of the whole company's operating model, we put together a set of 10, we call them standards of perfection. And these are the rules to live by in the company. So here's what we're best at. Here's the way we expect them to be delivered, right? And then getting the message out to everybody to all be on the same page about how you want to promote it is kind of how you get it living forward. And so my advice would be, going back to your question, define what you're going to be the best at and stick to it and make sure everybody understands what that is. Put some standards around it that you want the buildings or your businesses to kind of rally around, and make sure the messaging of those 2 things is very clear to everybody. And if they're living those things at the building level or business level, depending on what you do, you have a better shot of creating that culture with your employees because everybody is accountable and they understand what it is you're trying to do.
That's fantastic. Jim, you sparked a lot of ideas for me. I really enjoyed our conversation. See, there's that spark where we both use, right?
Thank you for using that because
Yeah.
our CEO will see this, be like, hey, you stayed in the brand, right? But yeah.
Yeah. We have the spark over the K in our JourneySpark logo, and it's at the center of our logo is a spark, right? And when I was coming up with the name of the company, I was trying to use spark because I think the culture as a flow of energy.
Uh-huh.
Right. So I think about sparking ideas, sparking energy. That's where I thought the word journey and spark came together.
We have a welcome book that we use in the buildings, and this is the back of the welcome book. So it's fun. We used this whole spark thing.
We were meant to be together on this podcast.
I believe we were.
Yeah.
Fated.
If folks want to get in touch with you, what is it? LinkedIn the best way to follow up?
The easiest way to get a hold of me is probably to go to my LinkedIn page, because you can send a message. But ironically enough, we have on our Ignite Medical Resorts website, igniteMedicalResorts.com. There's a contact us section that it just goes to a generic email, and those emails come to me. And so if you want to reach me, go to that. You can go to that site much easier than LinkedIn sometimes because messaging is kind of hard in LinkedIn. Sometimes you got to pay for it, right? But there, you can actually go there. You can send an email and say, hey, this is for Jim White. It comes to me, but it goes to one other person as well. But we send them to the applicable people when they come in. And so I would say probably the easiest free way is the Ignite Medical Resorts website, which you can also check out some of our buildings and what the company looks like and what we try to promote. But you can also go to LinkedIn and send me a request to connect or send me an email.
Thanks so much for coming on the podcast, Jim. It's been a lot of fun.
It's my pleasure. And like I said, for those of you listening to this, there were several things that came up that I'm going to check out as well, and so should you.